Welcome to the RECO12 speaker meeting. This is Justin, and I'm an addict. And thanks to my God, the steps, and the fellowship of other addicts, I'm sober one day at a time since June 19th, 2015. And for that, I'm beyond grateful. Once again, welcome to the RECO12 speaker meeting. We are an organization whose addictions include alcohol, drugs, lust and sex, food and gambling, just to name a few. We come together from all places, faiths, and backgrounds to learn the similarities of addiction and to gain tools and hope from others who are walking a similar path. We invite recovering addicts with at least 1 year sobriety and who are actively working their recovery in their respective fellowships to share their experience, strength, and hope on a live Zoom meeting each Friday at noon Central Time for 20 to 25 minutes. Then we, the live audience, get the opportunity to ask questions of the speaker for another 20 to 25 minutes. In order to ask questions, if you're here live, please type them in the Q&A link at the bottom of your Zoom window. We've had some really good participation in past weeks and look forward to further good participation in that. If you're hearing this recording podcast-wise and would like to participate in a future live meeting, or if you'd like even to be a guest speaker in a future meeting, please go to www.reco12.com, that's RECO12.com, to learn more and submit your email address there to receive weekly invitations or to submit to become a guest speaker. RECO12 is an ad-free service and self-supporting, and we appreciate your help in keeping it that way. We gratefully accept contributions to help cover the cost of the Zoom platform, podcast platform, web hosting, and administrative costs. The guest speaker also chooses a fellowship or recovery-centered organization to which the majority of contributions from that week's meetings will be donated to. To contribute, you can go to www.reco12.com/support, or you can click the link to PayPal in the chat of the live meeting. Or if you use Venmo, you can also contribute there. Our handle is @RECO-12, spelled out TWELVE. When you contribute, please specify the meeting number. This is meeting number 5. In last week's meeting, we heard from Wendy F., who shared many of the progressively miracles that she has experienced in her life of recovery. It was a beautiful conversation with great insights. If you missed hearing that one or any other meeting that we have done so far, you can listen to them in podcast form by searching for RECO12 Speaker Meeting Podcast on virtually any podcast platform that you use. Or you can go to RECO12 website and find it under the link podcast. Now, let's introduce our guest speaker for today, one of my very good friends, Kastle S. Kastle is just another recovering addict who is striving to live in the present and taking things one day at a time. He believes that there is hope for all of us and that all people deserve kindness and respect. Kastle started his reluctant journey of recovery by sitting in a parking lot outside of a meeting for 45 minutes, trying to convince himself that he wasn't an addict and that those people who attended meetings could never understand him. Unsurprisingly, those people were just like him in so many ways, and he was proud and grateful to be among such honest and vulnerable people. He began attending the addiction recovery program run through the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and also completed the 90-day program through arpsupport.org with an amazing sponsor, which was the beginning of a true and honest recovery rather than only sobriety. Kastle has been sober since September of 2017. Take it away, brother. We look forward to hearing from you. Here's Kastle.
Thank you so much, Justin. I just think that these meetings are even more pertinent in these times. I feel like as being an addict, not being around people as much, not having access to those things can make things a little more difficult. So I'm grateful for this meeting, and thank you so much for the introduction, Justin, and for everything that you do for our community. It's amazing, and I'm so grateful to know you and for all the work that you do for all of us. And I think that just as an introduction, I definitely did want to say that it's true what Justin read. I sat outside my first meeting for 45 minutes, and I just thought I wasn't like those people. I was a good person. I just happened to have a little bit of a problem, right? That I messed up on sometimes. But the reality is that, since going into that first meeting almost 6 years ago, everything has changed in the best way possible. And so I also wanted to just color in some of the blanks to give people an idea of my perspective, because I think all of us come from different walks of life, which is an awesome thing because it gives us different perspectives on different things, including addiction and recovery. In my case, a couple things about me, just to give a little bit of a picture of my perspective on addiction recovery and how my life has kind of affected that and where I've come from. Come from a family of just 10 kids, and I'm number 4, so I'm the oldest, or one of the oldest actually, and I grew up a lot with a lot of siblings, obviously, taking care of a lot of my siblings. My parents had quite a few issues growing up. I was raised in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but my family didn't always attend very regularly. And I would say that, when we did start attending regularly for about 2 years when I was 11, it was really neat because I did always believe that, there was a higher power and there was a greater purpose in this life. But I remember when I was 13 years old, when my parents got a divorce, it was really jarring for me. And that time was actually kind of the beginning to me getting into some different addictions and things that I probably shouldn't have gotten into, because I felt that, if there was a higher power who cared about me and who was giving me greater purpose, that I couldn't possibly have my parents who, were going through all these things and to split our family apart. And I remember moving right after my parents got divorced, going to a brand new school. And it was a wonderful time to be in school because it was middle school where everyone is so kind and so accepting and so secure in themselves, except that they're not. So it was really tough going into that with a lot of inner turmoil about faith and about my family and about who I was myself. And that's kind of what pushed me to kind of get into addiction, is feeling that I wasn't good enough, feeling that I couldn't talk to anyone about the things that I was struggling with, about the things that I was having a hard time with. And so, I continued throughout my teenage years until I was about 19. And I was really, really grateful when I turned 19 to kind of be able to take a good look at my life and kind of have some divine intervention with saying a prayer, because even though I was actually having a lot of fun, going to a lot of different parties, being involved in a lot of different things like that every single day, every night, whenever I was alone, I realized that I wasn't, I didn't have any peace if I was by myself, if I wasn't in the stimulation of being in a party or different things like that. I didn't like myself at all. I had a lot of self-loathing and different things like that. But kind of just to skip over a little further in my journey, specifically what I wanted to talk about today is I didn't necessarily admit that I was an addict at that time. I went on a mission for my church, came back when I was about 22, and I thought that I was cured and that I was great and that it was just a little problem that I had and I was over it. Even though I had never been to an addiction recovery meeting or anything, all I ever heard about them were the stigma surrounding them. People would make jokes a lot about, AA or about anyone who was recovering from an addiction, kind of always talked in a joking manner. And I never really heard anyone speak specifically to how much those type of meetings had helped them or having those conversations had helped them. So when I had a relapse about a year after coming back from that church mission, I was shocked because once again, I thought, my little problems were all gone and that I was good because I wasn't that person. And it was just a little problem I had. And I remember going to that first meeting once again, not wanting to go in at all. And then, like Justin read, going in and finding out that these were people who I guess I had always wanted to be around. And that sounds so crazy to say, but the reason why I say that is because I feel like, and even now in different 12-step meetings, recovery meetings, people are so authentic, vulnerable, and genuine about the struggles that they're going through and the way that addiction has had an impact on their life. And I never thought that I would say it when I was first getting into my addiction recovery journey, but now where I am, I can definitely say that I am grateful in many ways to have been an addict and to be an addict, because a couple of the big things that it's helped me understand is that there is so much in life to be grateful for. And there's so many things that I've learned about other people and myself that has pushed me towards seeing that everyone has problems. And even if, the people who aren't in recovery or 12-step meetings or people who I used to go to the meetings and just think that they were perfect because they had so many years of sobriety and, they were a sponsor and different things like that. I thought that, it was unattainable and that these people were perfect. And, come to understand once I became a sponsor myself, once I became a group leader myself, nope. My problems, not surprisingly, I say that sarcastically, but they didn't disappear. I still had triggers. I still had things that were really difficult for me because I was still an addict. And it wasn't just a little problem. It was something that I learned that I'm going to have to work on for the rest of my life, one day at a time. Specifically, I remember an experience when I was doing the 90-day program through ARP support. It was tough. I was in college full time. I was working full time. I was engaged. And I was doing a lot of volunteer, I think 3 different organizations, including the addiction recovery program where I was a group leader, a lot of different volunteer work. And of course, to add on to all of that, doing the 90-day program, going through all the 12 steps in 90 days, it was very strict and it was very tough. My sponsor, man, I really believe that he is one of the earthly angels that God sent specifically in my life to help me learn more about God and learn more about myself. And I say that because I remember specifically one instance where I learned that there is a big difference between being kind to someone and being nice to someone. And, one of the things that I wanted to talk about today specifically was kindness and compassion. And I think that I used to confuse kindness with being nice. But the difference being that I remember I was working on my step 4, such a lovely step for all of you who have who know what that is or who have been through it yourselves. But step 4 was so tough. And I remember one day texting my sponsor and just telling him, hey, I don't think I'm going to be able to complete it by, the goal that we had set or the deadline that we had of tonight. And I remember the text that I got back, and I was kind of stunned when I got it back because he said, Kastle, I love you, but I'm going to tell you something really honest because I love you and I care about you. I'm going to tell you that no one has ever held you accountable for being an addict. You have never had this level of accountability because you always give yourself a way out. You always give yourself a back door to go back to the addiction and to say that, oh, well, I did my best. And he's going to say, that's not acceptable for you to not complete your step 4 tonight. We committed to doing step 4 and to completing it by tonight. We had done it for a week or so, or 2 weeks maybe even. And he said, so I expect you to get it done tonight, or I will no longer be able to continue as your sponsor to help you through this addiction recovery program. And he reiterated once again, I love you and I care about you, which is the reason why I think that it's important for you to be held accountable as an addict, to understand that, we have to push through. If you really want to have recovery and to know what that's like, I'm going to challenge you to finish it by tonight. Oh, and that was such a hard text to get. At first, my prideful self was like, oh, you don't know anything about me. You don't know all the things that I've gone through in life. You don't know what I'm going through in life right now. You have no idea how busy I am, and all that anger and that resentment bubbled up in me. But when I said a prayer, I kind of felt that God told me the same thing, where he was saying, Grant's right. You have never been held accountable to this level in your journey with recovery and with addiction. And so if this is something that you want, then today is the day to show me your commitment and to complete your step 4. Oh, and it was so difficult. I still had class, I still had work that day, I still had other commitments, but I remember completing it at like 3:00 that morning. And maybe that wasn't the wisest decision to stay up that late, but it was me showing my commitment that day for what I really wanted. I wanted that peace that recovery brings that everyone always talks about. And I remember fast forwarding a lot, when I finally finished the 12 steps. I mean, I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that someone like me had made it. And then once again, I remember moving forward from then to start sponsoring people. I started speaking at different recovery events that people would have. I became a group leader. I started getting involved in a couple different groups as well, not just the ARP program for support for other people. But one of the big things I always remember that's interesting now that I've had a good number of years of sobriety and I've been in recovery for a good number of years as well, is that I spent a lot of time, even in the addiction recovery program. I do this a lot in everyday life too, but I was finding myself doing it even in meetings, is comparing myself to other people. And I felt that while it was a really vulnerable and honest community, I even sometimes could feel that pride coming into our recovery community of, hey, if I have more years than you, that makes me better than you. If I have more years of recovery or sobriety than you, I am superior to you. Or I felt that sometimes when I would try to go to some of the people who had more sobriety or recovery than me and ask for, mentorship or just advice, I could almost sense that, I don't know, I felt that they didn't treat me very well, because I felt like they saw me as someone who was less than them. And one of my favorite steps, and one of the big things that I've learned through being involved in addiction recovery and different programs like that, is that, none of us are better than anyone else. And I think that's where the big lesson of kindness and compassion came for me, where I would hear someone who, it was fantastic that they were 8 years into sobriety and their recovery. But then I would see the way that they would treat other people who maybe were there for the first time, or someone who had just had a relapse. And it was really disappointing to me that I often, could sense almost the judgment. And when they were speaking to that person, the condemning judgment, I guess I should say. And that always really disappointed me. And one of the big lessons that I guess I've been able to learn from those interactions, from even being a sponsor myself, where I don't think I wasn't the nicest person either when I had to drop some of my sponsees, or when I had to have those hard conversations like Grant had with me during my step 4, is that, kindness and compassion, it doesn't cost anything. And it actually, those two things don't depend on where you're at in number of days being sober or number of days being in recovery. I've come to find that no matter how many days I have or years I or anyone else have, I love the sentiment in step 12 of turning outward to other people. And to me, the way that I can turn outward, and it sounds like it's not a big deal, but for me, when I was going through, the people who helped me probably the most were those, once again, who were kind enough to hold me accountable, but also those who showed me compassion when I wasn't perfect, when I did slip up, when I did miss something, when I did have a relapse, were those people who told me, it's going to be okay. We have to work harder and start again, but this doesn't make you worth less in any sense. And this doesn't take away the fact that you are committed and that you're trying and that you're here. And I don't know, those statements, they were just so powerful to me. And I still remember them to this day, even though they were 5, 6, 7 years ago, or even longer for the people who chose to be kind to me, even when I wasn't in recovery. And I guess that's one of the big things that I've learned, is that no matter who we are or where we're from or what our circumstances are, specifically in these types of meetings, when we're discussing recovery or sobriety, that, it's so wonderful to gain that sobriety, which leads you to recovery. And recovery provides such an amazing sense of peace. But all of us can choose, no matter where we're at in our recovery journey or in our addiction journey, to be kind and to have compassion and empathy for other people. That's another big lesson I've learned, is sometimes I would be that condemningly judging person, where I would hear someone come in over and over again to a group, and talk about, the unfortunate relapses that they continue to have. And sometimes I would think in my head, oh my goodness, like, why can't this person just get it together? Which was so hypocritical, because I was that person who couldn't get it together. And I'm still that person some days who just can't get it all together. Or I would put people on, once again, on that pedestal, saying, oh my gosh, that person has so many years of sobriety, they must be perfect. And I mean, either way, it's not helping anyone to compare myself to other people. And the first person that I've had to learn to be kind to and compassionate with is myself. When I have days that I'm so disappointed in myself and the decisions that I've made, I have to remember that it's okay. Once again, regardless of my choices or my thoughts, I am not worth less. I can do better, but my worth doesn't change. And I don't know, I just always come back to that in the hardest days that I have, that, the God that I believe in will love me no matter what. And he's so proud of every single decision I make that pushes me in the right direction, of course, to sobriety, to recovery, to compassion, to being kind and reaching out to other people. But, I don't know, I just have to remember that. And so even if I were to have a slip or a relapse today or tomorrow or in a year or whatever it might be, not that I'm planning on that, because I'm fighting to stay present, but I have to remember that even in those times of weakness, that my value doesn't change. I am still a loved child of God, and I'm worth it. And the thing that I love to just encourage people, anyone, including myself, to remember is that we can make it. We can do this. And addiction and recovery are both things that are possible for anyone and for everyone. And I truly believe that no one is beyond hope and no one is beyond help. And I truly believe that if we took the time in our everyday lives to maybe behave more of the way that we behave in addiction and recovery meetings, where we're more honest, where we're more vulnerable, we're compassionate, we're empathetic, we're kind, that's what will change the world, not just for recovering addicts, but for the entire world. And, I've felt a lot of the weight of a lot of the things that have been happening lately on the news and different things like that here in the US, of course, with the pandemic and with the different different political things that are happening, different conversations around the protests, riots. It can all be very heavy sometimes, and I feel that deeply. But what I choose to continue to believe, and something that being an addict and being an addict in recovery has solidified to me, is that no matter what group someone belongs to, once again, whether they're a recovering addict, I know that we're also similar now, but whether any of them are, any group that we don't believe in, any group that we don't necessarily jive with or don't empathize with, we can learn to try and see things from different perspectives, and we can still be kind and we can still be compassionate to anyone. And I'm just so grateful because as a recovering addict, I know that my journey is never done and it won't be done. Something actually that Justin says a lot that I love is until I'm safely dead. And I believe that because it is a one day at a time journey. And sometimes that sounds, even to myself, when I say it to myself, sometimes it's like, God, that sounds crazy, but it's not just one day. I have so many years. I have next month, I have next week when I know this stressful project is coming up or something like that. But when I'm most at peace in my life is when I'm able to stay just in today and ask God every day, what can I do for you today? And more often than not, I think the way that I honor God and honor myself as a recovering addict and live true to all of the steps is when I'm honest with other people, when I'm willing to be kind and compassionate to another, even if I don't understand them or don't agree with where they're coming from, to give them that kindness. And sometimes that kindness, once again, looks like holding someone accountable or being honest with them. But sometimes that kindness is just listening without judgment and just listening without giving advice, because that's not always what people need. And so I'm just eternally grateful for the support network that I have, that has continued to be kind and compassionate to me, even though I've messed up so many times and I continue to mess up and make mistakes every day, that it's okay, because the higher power that gets me through one day at a time is a higher power that's loving, that's kind and compassionate, and that is willing to put up with me, more than put up with me, but is willing to really just take me by the hand and lead me down the path that I need to take. And there's so many amazing people I've met through being involved in different addiction recovery groups and different support groups. And their kindness and their compassion is, it's a huge motivation for me to keep going, to keep trying every single day, because it's worth it, because I'm worth it, because I believe that God doesn't make mistakes, and he made every single one of us, and none of us is a mistake. We make mistakes through our actions, but who we are, we're not a mistake. And that's what keeps me going every day.
Awesome. Kastle, that was beautiful. I really appreciate it. And I love, one of the many things I love about you is that you really are authentic in your kindness and compassion for others. And I really admire that. I have felt that kindness and compassion in my own life, and I strive very imperfectly to emulate it. Now, before we read the questions that have come in, Kastle, would you mind sharing for 60 seconds or less, or about 60 seconds, about Operation Underground Railroad, which is the organization that you have elected to have any contributions go to, and why you chose that organization?
Absolutely. Yeah. Operation Underground Railroad is so important to me. It's an organization that is a nonprofit that actually works towards eliminating human trafficking. A lot of their work actually is specifically in human sex trafficking. And to me, it's such a near and dear part of my heart, because I just think of all the people in this world who don't have the opportunity to be free, and all the harm that they have to go through because of people like me who are prideful, who are selfish and can't see beyond themselves. And this organization, to me, that's the greatest thing to work towards, because one of their big focuses is on children in the human trafficking industry. And, no child deserves that because they're innocent and pure. And it's just an amazing, amazing organization. If any of you have the opportunity to check them out, I really, really encourage you to do so, because they do some amazing work, and they've continued to do it throughout the years, throughout this pandemic. And they're doing what I believe in. They're being the most kind and compassionate they are in helping, making sure these children are safe and can live the best life that they can.
Awesome. Thanks, Kastle. Now, to our audience, if you're feeling a nudging to make a small contribution, please go and do that either through the links here on the chat or through RECO12.com/support, or directly at Operation Underground project, Operation Underground Railroad. And you can find them with a Google search. So we have a question that came in, Kastle. You did address it, but I want you to readdress this. Eric came in a little bit late, and he says, you may have addressed this. You mentioned ARP. Is that a program affiliated with your faith tradition? If so, may I speak with you later? So go ahead and address the first question, and then we'll make sure that anybody who has questions can send an email to us. We'll get that to you and then connect you with them.
Absolutely. Well, hey, Eric, good to see you. I can't see you, but good to hear from you. Thanks for your comment. Yeah, the ARP program is actually a 12-step program that was organized and created through the church that I go to currently, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And it's the program that I started in and that I've continued with, and that has helped me. And I've been to a couple different ones, but it is particular to the organization that I belong to, the church that I go to, and it kind of weaves in our specific faith into that, into the steps. It's still based on the AA book, the white book, the original one, but it does kind of have some modifications, just that once again puts in a little bit more of our specific faith and religious beliefs into it. And yes, you're more than welcome to reach out later. I'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. So Eric, if you'd like to nobody can see the question and answer but us moderators here. So if you want to put your email address in there, I can relay that to Kastle, and also any of the listening audience. If you ever want to get in touch with any of our guests, send an email through my website, RECO12.com, or the email address is RECO12pod@gmail.com, and that's the number 12 in those. All right, so I have a question. I love, so you talked about the people when you first went into a recovery meeting, how you kind of just really identified with them quickly, as hesitant as you were to go in. The last paragraph in the section called "The Solution" in the White Book of Sexaholics Anonymous reads this. I want to read it and then have you comment on it. It reads, "We began practicing a positive sobriety, taking the actions of love to improve our relations with others. We were learning how to give, and the measure we gave was the measure we got back. We were finding that none of the substitutes had ever supplied. We were making the real connection. We were home." I'd like you to talk a little bit about that, and what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I love that so much. The word love being in the same context of being home, because once again, no matter what your addiction is, no matter what your struggles in life are, I think all of us can remember the people who have treated us with that unfiltered love, meaning that they had no agenda to their love. They just gave it to us because we were another human being. And that sense of being home, one of the quotes that I love the most is that home is not a place, it's a feeling. And one of the places that I feel the most at home, or that I feel the most love, has been and continues to be in these type of support groups. I mean, as we focus on that love, and I think the greatest motivator for me to remain in sobriety and recovery is actually love. And for me specifically, it's the love of God, because I just know how much God loves me and loves all of us. And so for me, when I'm able to feel that love, that is when I feel home. And I've seen other people who have come forward to me, saying things like, "I've never told anyone this before." And then they come out to me with something extremely vulnerable, including addictions that people have had and different things like that. And I'm always interested, and I thank them so much for sharing those things with me. And then, a lot of these people I've been able to bring to recovery meetings with me, to bring to different support groups with me, so that they can find that. And one of the things that I've appreciated most is that God has used me as that safe place. He's filtered his love through me so that other people can feel that in such a way that they feel safe, or as I like to think of it, at home and coming to me with these different issues and addictions that they're coming through. And there is so much intense satisfaction in seeing someone who comes to a recovery meeting, and then through feeling that love and acceptance from others in the group, from their sponsor, from anyone, they find their home in that meeting and they continue to just skyrocket in their recovery and in their sobriety. And so not sure if I comment on that specifically in any certain way, but I truly just believe that that love and that kindness is such a powerful motivator for me to continue to try every day to remain in recovery.
And I love that. Quick reminder to our live audience: if you have questions, type it in the Q&A section below. And so, Kastle, I love that. And there are many people different meetings that I've attended. In fact, my own willingness to continue going to meetings was spurred by one single person who, after the first meeting, I wanted to slink out of there as fast as I could and just disappear. As cool as I thought it was, I was like, I don't belong here, and I tried to sneak out as fast as I could. And one of my heroes in life, Benjamin, grabbed me as I was trying to sneak out the back door as quick as I could. And he said, "I'm glad to see you here. I'll see you next week." And he kind of put his arm around me as he said that. And I was like, in my mind, I'm thinking, no, you won't. But then as I went on through that week, I was like, you know what? He wanted me to be there, and I'm going to be there. And it turned into, like you said, I became at home. I found my people. Was your experience, I mean, you said that it was pretty quick there. Have you had other experiences in your life where you've gone into a place like that and you thought, I don't know if I want to really be here, but I'm going to come back? And then it became that situation like you talked about where, all of a sudden you were home.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. In so many instances, I think that it was funny, even as part of my recovery kind of daily spiritual rituals that I go through. I was doing one this morning where the question, interestingly enough, was asking about me coming back to church, and as addicts, sometimes it's difficult to come to a group where you feel like you don't belong. And I definitely didn't feel like I belong in the church that I was raised in, because of the fact that, I was an addict. I felt that I was too imperfect, that everyone I saw there was just so perfect. And man, I could never be like them. I'm going to open the door and I'm just going to burst into flames. I start the lightning now because I'm an awful person. I'm horrible. How could anyone ever love me? How could anyone ever stand to give me the time of day if they really knew who I was and the actions that I'm taking, or the thoughts in my head? And I've got to say that, I was mistaken. I remember going to my leader over the congregation, called our bishop, and he telling him about this and just being in tears because I was literally shaking because I had never talked to anyone about the things that I had done in my life that I was ashamed of. And you know what? I was ready for him to bring down that hammer of justice and that hammer of God to smite me down as the sinner I was. And all he did was stand up, because we were sitting, across the desk from one another, come around from his desk and give me a big hug. And, I couldn't even speak. And he just said, thank you so much for sharing that with me. And thank you for being here. I'm proud of you for doing that. And let's meet again next week. And once we do so, we're going to talk more about this. And I can't even tell you how quickly that made me feel at home, like the situation that you had as well, Justin. It was amazing.
Awesome. And wouldn't it be awesome if everybody's experience when they came out in whatever way with their addiction to somebody else was that loving and accepting? And I think that's kind of your message here. Kindness and compassion for people's foibles, because we all have those weaknesses. All right. Another question came in from an anonymous attendee. They said, you mentioned you come from a large family, Kastle. Do you communicate with your siblings and parents about your recovery? If so, how did you initiate that communication?
Oh my gosh, we'll talk about an awkward conversation. That is such a good question. It was so hard to talk to. It's funny because it was hard enough to talk to people I didn't know, but I found it easier to talk to people that I didn't know about my addiction than I did talking about people who had known me for a while, or who were in my family or my friend circle. So Currently, once I really got into the program, I definitely opened up to my parents, a couple of my siblings as well. Um, I wish that we all had super vulnerable and honest relationships with each other right now, but the reality of the situation is we don't all share that relationship. And it's never necessarily a way that I lead in a conversation like, hey, how have you been? I'm an addict. It's something that I usually try to do a little more when the opportunity presents itself, because several of my siblings also are involved in addictions themselves. And um, I felt prompted by God at times to reach out specifically to them to let them know about my recovery. And I was able to get one of my brothers to, go to a meeting as well. And that was so great because we had never had that level of relationship before where we talked about that. But for my other siblings, for some of them, I just don't think that they're quite at the level yet. But whenever the opportunity presents itself with some of my siblings, because there's so many, right? So whenever I hear a joke about recovery or, addicts being made, I always pop in, I'm like, yeah, they're just like me, or whenever my sibling talks about hard things that they're going to, that's kind of where I can open up as well and say, hey, I've been going through difficult things as well. And I would love to share my journey with you if you're open to it. So the answer is kind of yes and no. My parents are definitely very involved and in the know about my addiction, my recovery. A lot of my family members and friends as well, but not all of my siblings. But I really do try to stick to that, being vulnerable and honest whenever the opportunity presents itself.
Thank you, Kastle. I appreciate that. All right, here's a question from Heather. She says, hi, Kastle. Love you and thank you for sharing. I am wondering what you are doing to stay connected with God or your higher power during this chaotic time. In other words, is there anything you are doing specifically since the pandemic or that you have changed?
Hi, Heather. I love you too. It's great to hear from you. I think specifically some of the things in the pandemic, man, it's so weird, isn't it? This whole thing, once again, not really the most exciting thing for addicts to be going through. But I think some of the things that actually, I remember when it first started, the stay-at-home order, where I am here in Washington, was, I took the opportunity and said, okay, God, once again, I don't think this is going to be the best thing for me as a recovering addict, but I know that there's a purpose in this and I believe that there's a plan in this. So however this is supposed to play out, help me know specifically what I'm supposed to do. And one of the things that has been really great and helpful during this pandemic is, even more so than I was doing before, is focusing on solidifying those daily things that I do. Specifically during this time, I've gotten to spend a lot more time outside. Actually has been really, really helpful for me, going on a walk every morning, just by myself, outside, out in the fresh air, really taking this time, since we can't be around people or go places, to spend a longer amount of time during my prayers, my meditation, my scripture study, spending a longer time thinking about who can I reach out to today, who might need help from me. And so it's not that I've necessarily done anything drastically different than I typically do in everyday life as a recovering addict, but it's that God has kind of shown me that this opportunity during this pandemic, what's been helpful is that I have, instead of seeing it as, oh my gosh, I can't go see my friends, or oh my gosh, I can't go do this, or I can't go do that. Instead, he's helped me see that, hey, this is more time actually for you to pour into your recovery. Spend more time on that prayer and that meditation, in the morning. Spend more time on that journaling at night, since you don't have those meetings that you would typically have. And so for me, it's been finding those opportunities to, and I'm definitely guilty of refunneling my time to like play a game or something on my phone. I'm not perfect every day, but on the days that I really am focusing in my recovery and on my relationship with God, is funneling that additional time into how can I either extend my self-care and my connection to God, or how can I reach out to other people and extend that care to them.
Awesome. Thank you. Speaking of that, you're talking a lot about your connection with God, and you mentioned that when you're sitting across the desk from your bishop, you were expecting the hammer of God to come down and smash you flat. How has that perception of who God is to you changed over your lifetime? And so tell us what has changed, and then tell us how that process has gone, please.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's been so interesting because, once again, I did grow up in a household that, we were taught to believe in God and that God existed. But unfortunately, the majority of what I understood God to be when I was young and when I was in my teenage years, or at least what I understood religion to be, which is a separate thing from faith in God himself, I believe that, was that all he cared about was that I kept rules. All he cared about was that I kept the rules and the guidance that were given to me. It wasn't until later, once again, when I was starting my journey into coming into recovery and being honest with people for the first time about the addictions that I was involved in, that I realized that God is someone who loves me and cares about me. And one portion of my story also that I haven't shared yet, which is, it goes almost kind of hand in hand with being a recovering addict, but it is separate in its own right, is the fact that as someone who, believes in God and believes in Christ, I had to come to terms with the fact that, I was someone who experiences same-sex attraction, or I'm someone who is a part of the LGBTQ community. And that brought me a lot of shame for a long time. And I even remember, talking to God about it for the first time. And it's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that I can't follow you anymore. It's been great that I've been able to get help with this recovery, but this part of me specifically, clearly this is something that I can't have and follow you. And it was at that time in my journey, once again, I was still in my recovery journey when I kind of started to come to terms with this part of myself as well, where I once again, God always comes through, where he, kind of spoke to me and said, why would this change anything that I feel about you? And so that further solidified that with, being in the recovery, and then also going through this part of me, which is often, as being akin to a recovering addict, is often joked about. People often say very unkind and mean things about people who are a part of this LGBTQ community, who experience same-sex attraction or gender dysphoria. But once again, when I came and told people about this, people who I knew from church, people who I knew in recovery meetings, my sponsor even was someone that I talked to about it. It was so amazing to see the love, once again, and the kindness that people showed, that every single time I was ready for those relationships to be like, well, that's something I can't handle. Thank you so much for sharing that, and good luck in your life. But with every time God prompted me that this is someone who you should share this part of you with as well, I was met with nothing but kindness and compassion and honest questioning. And so my relationship with God has come from seeing him as someone who just wants me to follow rules, and if I don't follow rules, will smash me down with a hammer, to becoming something that actually is a relationship with someone who understands me completely and loves every single part of me, which is why I think the people that I've met who are so kind and compassionate and who I try to emulate, every time I ask them how they got to that point, it always has to do with them understanding that God or a higher power loves them, and they know their worth in that, in that whoever their higher power is in their eyes. And once I was able to see how God sees me, and he gives me glimpses of that even now and then when I get discouraged, it's amazing. And that's what helps me realize that no matter how, once again, going back to what I was saying, addict, relapses, shame, me being part of communities that are looked down upon, people thinking badly of me, it doesn't matter, because God is someone who loves us no matter what. He's proud of us when we choose the right things that are going to help us create a healthier self and a healthier world, but his love doesn't change. So he's gone from this judgmental hammer person to, basically my best friend and the person that I want to have a connection with more than anything else.
Beautiful, beautiful. Something you mentioned there, Kastle, kind of triggered another thought, another question in my mind. That is now gone. So apparently it wasn't that important. Before we close up, does anybody else have a question out there? And if you do, type it in while Kastle is sharing something here, while I invite him to do it. Whether he does it or not is his choice. But do you have any other closing remarks, any other words of wisdom that you'd like to share with us before we close down?
Yeah, I don't think I have very many words of wisdom, but something that I don't know, it's something that I need to remind myself a lot too, and that I love to share with people when they come to me with the difficult things that they're going to, or the vulnerable things that they're going to, is that please don't give up. Please know that no matter who you are, where you are, what you think about yourself, your lack of support, the amount of support that you have or lack thereof, it doesn't change your value. It doesn't change the fact that you're worth fighting for. And once again, you matter. You matter. We all matter, because we're children of God, and because God doesn't make mistakes and he made each of us. We all have something to contribute, And once again, the things that we can contribute might not always be money. They might not always be a lot of time because we're really busy, but treating someone else who you meet throughout the day, or someone in your life who you come in contact with, or even if someone who you have a hard time with, the most important thing is that kindness doesn't cost a thing. Being respectful, being kind, listening, and giving compassion to another person, it really doesn't cost you anything. So remember that you matter and that everyone you meet matters too. And so we should treat ourselves and other people like we matter.
Awesome. You actually answered the question I was going to ask that I had forgotten. So I really appreciate that. The question was, hey, how do you talk to somebody who is really discouraged and feeling down, who really doesn't see themselves as worthy of any sort of love from God or anybody else? And I think you answered it right there. So perfect. All right. Well, thank you all for your participation. Thank you, Kastle, for your participation and great contribution to this meeting. It was a great meeting for all addicts and for those wanting to learn more about addiction and the recovery therefrom. If you do have additional questions, or you and the recorded listening audience have any questions, you can go to www.RECO12.com/forum and join in the community there and ask those questions or answer other people's questions that may come up. I invite the audience to come back next week also. Next week, we have a fantastic meeting with Terrence, who is a recovering compulsive shoplifter and thief. And it's going to be very unique. I've never had a conversation with somebody in recovery from this, and I'm really looking forward to it. I think it'll be a great insight into addiction overall. If you have not yet gone to RECO12.com and submitted your email address, you only need to do it once. Please go and get on the invitation list so that you can join us live every Friday at noon Central Time. Now, right now, I'm going to close this up. If you'd like to join me in the prayer of St. Francis, which I find is a beautiful prayer, please do so now. Lord, make me a channel of thy peace, that where there is hatred, I may bring love. That where there is wrong, I may bring the spirit of forgiveness. That where there is discord, I may bring harmony. That where there is error, I may bring truth. That where there is doubt, I may bring faith. That where there is despair, I may bring hope. That where there are shadows, I may bring light. That where there is sadness, I may bring joy. Lord, grant that I may seek rather to comfort than to be comforted, to understand than to be understood, to love than to be loved. For it is by self-forgetting that one finds. It is by forgiving that one is forgiven. It is by dying that one awakens to eternal life. Amen. All right, everybody, keep coming back. It works if you work it, so work it. You're worth it. Have a great week, everyone.
Here I am, still standing tall, despite